Welcome everyone. My name is Fernando Parra. I'm the director of the Institute for Family Business, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here today. Recently, we conducted a study of family businesses here in the Central Valley, and we understood that most family businesses were facing issues with attracting and keeping their talent. Wonder what that was all about, and so we will give a report pretty soon here in our Correct Talks in April. That's why we reached out to my colleague and friend, Dr. Wandeler, who is an associate professor at Fresno State. He's also leading expert in organizational behavior, and he has done plenty of consulting in issues like this that relate to attracting and retaining your talent. And so I don't want to overwhelm you with my words. Instead, let me go ahead and I'll give you a warm welcome instead. Welcome, Dr. Wandeler. Did I get everything right?
Yes, everything right.
Okay, please.
Yep. All right. So good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to see you here. Welcome to Fresno State for those who are external to campus. Who are current students? Some of you here. All right. Many of you. Fantastic. Welcome. Who are business owners that are really dealing with this issue at the moment? Who are consultants with people who consult businesses? Yes, all right, great. So I want to keep this in mind, right? Because my goal was to make this really practical for you all, right? And maybe if you're not a business owner right now, it might be something to keep in mind for later on, right? If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to scan the code here. Quickly start with introducing myself. I'm originally from Switzerland, from a city called Fribourg, which is called like a Freiburg. If you're familiar with the Middle Ages, cities were the places where people got to be free, right? So typically, people that lived on the countryside, they were basically in servitude of their landowners, right? And so if they would make it to a city, in the city, they would become citizens, right? And as a citizen, you were a free person, right? So typically you would become a craftsperson and you would, kind of be your own boss, right? So it's an example of also, more freedom and free enterprise. And one of the examples you see here is this cathedral, right? And I typically use this as an example when I work with teams and companies, right, where I ask them, how long do you think it took to build this cathedral? What do you guys think? How long did it take? Just take a guess.
Like 800 years.
800 years? Okay. Yeah? 150? Yeah. It's about in the middle, right? It took over 200 years to build this cathedral. Okay, so the people that started never seen it actually finished, right? And that's something that a lot of us might be involved as well when you work for a company, right? You're sometimes working on things that you won't even see the end of it, right? And I think that's something that makes good companies is where you have a vision, where you work for something bigger than just the everyday grind, right? I then had the great honor to go to Stanford to be a visiting scholar there. And after that, I became a professor here at Fresno State, and I am at the School of Education, right, where I do research in education and learning. And my specialty is actually learning in companies, right? What do people do in organizations for us to continuously learn? As an example, who has dealt with artificial intelligence, AI, lately, right? So, yeah. How did you guys learn about that? Did you take a class? Huh? A colleague, right? Somebody showed you, right? This guy, right? Right, but it's an example of if you don't stay relevant and current, right? Before you know it, something is happening that you're just not aware of, right? So that's what I'm really curious about is like how does organizational learning happen? Mm-hmm. And part of it is also to create this culture in a company. Right? I do research at how do you promote hope at work, how do you develop human-centered management, and how do you create innovative organizations? And when I work with businesses, what I do a lot of consulting is how do you design your organization so that you can foster motivation of people, right? Where they really like to go to work, and also where you stay innovative, where you stay current, right? For example, the future of work. How do you create hybrid working environments, right? With COVID, all of a sudden everybody had to work from home, right? How do you adapt to that, right? If you can't keep up and if it blocks your business, you're gonna lag behind the competition, right? And so I work also with leaders to coach them and with teams to help them with collaboration, right? Communication is a big thing, but also how do you get stuff done as a team? And today we're gonna talk about the attraction of talent, the retention of talent, and then we'll also have a time for Q&A and further discussions. So I'm trying to create as much value for you all as possible in this short amount of time, okay? And if you currently don't have a business, try to pretend that you are in a business, right? Or maybe you're at a workplace, right? For the students, who has a job on the side? Some of you do, right? Yeah. So imagine, maybe think about that workplace, right? Where you're familiar, something that you can relate to. And I'll also walk you through this workshop in a way that I would work with a company and a team, right? We would probably have a little bit more time, right? But the essence will be the same thing. And one of the principles I use is design thinking. Who's heard of design thinking before? Yes? None of you guys? Well, quick overview, right? Design thinking is basically the idea that you're empathizing with people or your customer so that you really understand what's the situation, right? Then you think about really defining the problem, right? So in university, we would call this research, right? We're doing research, we're trying to understand what exactly is going on. And only after that, we start generating ideas and a solution, a prototype, that we then test in reality, and then we again do the empathizing and defining part. Right? So imagine it's a cycle like that. And design thinking is a way that's also very helpful for entrepreneurs to employ with their business. Right? Instead of building something that you don't even know if people want it, right? You come up with a prototype, you test it out, see if people want it, and then you go from there. And please, if you ever have questions, feel free to interrupt me. All right? This is not just a lecture, it's supposed to be interactive. So quick question for you guys. What intrigues you about this topic? Why are you here today?
Well, let's start by sharing some of the comments of the people that were not able to be here today.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the members of our family business community were really struggling during the last 2 years to keep their talent. And you know, I speak to students that are seeking the proper placement, and I get the feedback of the culture they get. They've gotten good offers, yet a question that was asked during the interview process or somebody they met in the workplace environment just turned them off and said, I don't think I can do this, even if they pay me $10,000 more than the next offer. And I'm really like, you know, this is a wonderful offer. You know, by the way, accountants get attractive offers as soon as they graduate, in comparison to other fields out there. And so I think what I want to understand is, what can we learn from this that is not necessarily just about money, right? Because if there's limited resources, you can only pay and compensate someone with monetary incentives to a certain level, and then culture and the rest and the environment where you're at, and strategies that can better align people with the choices is what I like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we'll speak to that point. Yeah. Other motivations? What brings you here?
I want to know, similar to what you said, if money is actually also a factor, because it could also be things like social norms or like how you feel towards your job. I want to know if it's more just like if it's people like saying, oh, this is not my dream job or how I see myself in 10 years, or if it's more something different, like
Yeah.
they need the more money or something like that. I want to know if there's like some differentiation.
Okay, yeah, we'll speak to that, definitely. What do you guys think now? Is a job, the attractiveness of a job is mainly related to money, or is the whole culture, the social piece important too? What do you guys, what do you think right now?
Somewhere 50-50.
50-50?
I was going to say, can we get both?
Yeah.
100%.
All right.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I personally was at a job for almost 5 years, and I knew they were underpaying me by 40%. I also helped manage the budget, so I knew they couldn't afford more. So for me, it was very much the products we were creating were exciting, and it was meaningful being part of that. So it was with great hesitation that I eventually left, because that's when money became an issue. Couldn't afford to pay for childcare after having kids. So it really was about my life goals, why I stayed at a place that paid less because I was driving meaning, but it changed when my priorities for my family finances changed.
Mm-hmm.
So I always was very curious of like, gosh, like why did I stay for so long when I could have been earning so much more money elsewhere? So it'd be nice to quantify that in really like abstract terms to understand it better, but also to create a culture and environment that naturally retains employees, because we have that hope and those goals and ambitions are all on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. That's a wonderful example. If I may ask, what type of products did you make that motivated you?
It was education.
Education, okay.
It was a private university that was really working together to using design thinking procedures to reform our education. So we worked a lot. And my work was a lot with accreditation on like proposing new programs and proposing changes to our programs.
Okay. Okay.
So it was exciting.
Yes. So Dr. Parr and I can relate to that, right? Yes. Awesome. Thank you. So we'll again have these two focuses today, right? We'll look at what do we do to attract talent, and then what can we do to retain talent, right? And we'll start a little bit more with a statistic here, right? If you would think about what percentage of people is open to leave, right? This is from the US. This is a study done by Gallup. And this is the most recent number here for, it was in November 2023, is 48% of people in the US are actively seeking for a new job, right? So if any business is representative of the average in the US, it's about 1 in 2 people, right? And so I think that's one thing to be important to be aware of, right? Probably half of your people, again, if you're an average company, is looking and open for a change, right? And you can see that this dipped a little bit here, right? But it came up, but it's it's about a good average, yeah.
Could you address length of employment, because it's shifted. When my generation, you stayed with the company 25 years and retired.
Yes.
So that was the model for most employees.
Right.
If you did a good job, you could stay. Now most employees, change jobs in about 2-3 years.
Yes.
So that might be why that number is so high. Can you talk a little about it?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly. See, this goes about 10 years back, right? So it was around 50% already 10 years ago, right? Now, I think the trends are indeed that we tend to stay with companies much less long, right? And I think that trend is not gonna change, right? On the opposite, yeah.
I think I saw an educational piece on this where they explained that it was the birth of retirement plans, like employee-funded retirement plans, and the death of pensions. Pensions have gone down in popularity than company pensions. That has driven a lot of people away from long-term employment. And now what we're seeing in the job market is the best way to actually make more money is to either go somewhere and make more money, like get a better offer from somewhere else,
Okay.
or get a better offer from someone else and then go to your employer and say, pay me more or I'll go somewhere else. So that's the best way to get a raise is because
I'll remember that.
I'm
Jay.
35, and that's the gospel that's preached, at least to my generation, is that the best way to increase your pay is not to stay with the same company. They're not going to increase your pay. It's better to jump jobs every 3 years, because a lot of HR companies are authorized more to pay more to attract new talent than to retain their own and offer raises.
Mm-hmm.
That idea of the grass is always greener goes both ways.
Right, right.
When it comes to funding.
Yes, and so to that point, right? How much do you guys think it costs to replace somebody that leaves?
It's always more expensive.
Yeah, it's always more expensive, yeah. So there's some estimates that go up to a year's worth of salary, right, to replace somebody, right? So as a business, right, it might be worthwhile, like that's one of my recommendations, to actually consider raising people's pay much more quickly than encouraging that dynamic, right? But yeah, that's something to really think about HR. And just a quick comment, who of you guys has had HR classes or HR experience? Some of you, okay, right? So for me, HR strategy means business strategy, right? And if you think of this as a competitive advantage, right, then this whole presentation will make a lot more sense, right? This is especially important when you think of the people that you have in your organization are the ones that actually create the value, right? If you feel like, hey, in my business, the people don't really matter that much, yeah, then maybe the HR strategy is less important, right? But if people are a key factor for your success, you should really think of HR more as a business strategy than just something you have to do. Here's just an overview of all the different topics related to HR, right? It goes from organizational design to behavioral sciences to job description, job planning, recruiting, right? Competency models, performance evaluations, competence, right? It goes with feedback, succession planning, training, but then also compensations, right? So there's a lot to that. Today, we're just going to focus on the attraction of talent and the retention, right? And you have basically two elements, right? If HR strategy is really about the future of the organization, right? And you have HR administration, which is the daily operations and topics, right? And what I notice quite a bit is that companies, Ernest Shackleton, yes? Right? So he was the guy that wanted to go to the South Pole, right? And this is actually, if you ever heard the story of him looking for people, right? This is actually, there's not really any proof that this happened this way, right? This is a fictitious example, right? But what he has supposedly said is that men are wanted, right, for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success, right? And the story goes that he had a lot of people apply that wanted to be part of this mission, right? And to your point, it was less about money, but it was more about, hey, this is exciting, right? So part of it is also when you attract talent is how do we shape this story for our company, right? What are we looking for? How do we attract people to our company? So let me ask you another statistic. What % of people do you think that right now they're working at a place that is great to work for? What do you think? 30%. 30%? Okay. 15? 40?
Excluding myself from the 40.
Yeah. So actually you guys are pretty close. It's about 1 in 3. It's 28% of the people would right now recommend their workplace to somebody else, right? And that's important when you're trying to attract people, right, to come work for you. If about 1/3 of the people actually don't really advocate for your workplace, makes it more difficult, right? And because today's Happy Pi Day, or I said about 1 in 3.14 people says that.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. So when you have a talent acquisition strategy, there's the following questions that I would recommend you think about. All right. So the first is, if again people are important for the success of our company, right? What are we doing that is critical for our competitive advantage? Right? Then also to think about what are major challenges in our talent acquisition and how do we allocate resources to overcome these challenges? And then what are some key approaches in our talent acquisition, and how are these approaches strategically aligned with our internal culture and with our context? All right? And now I'll walk you through a little exercise that will help you answer some of these questions. Right? And this is on your worksheet on the first page. So the first thing is this: what's your goal? Right? Does everybody have a handout?
Yes.
Good. All right. So first question is this: as a company, and again, for those of you who are not in a company, think about, let's say you start your own company. What would be your goal, right? All right, what would the idea look like? And then why is this goal important? And how could you measure if you reached your goal? Right? It could be numbers, or it could be stories, it could be results. Right? And then also, by when would you want to meet this goal? Let's say, do we have some goals? Is somebody willing to share their goals?
Yeah, one of the goals, the goal I put down was to have 100 clients that benefit from our services. That
Okay.
report to us that, we helped our company grow, our business grow.
Yeah.
And I said 1 year.
Okay, great. Right, and yeah.
Well, I was just having a conversation about incubators and how some incubators look at new businesses in terms of their access to technology, their obviously their economic plan, the market. But one important thing is what the team looks like. Employees. So one goal would be to get the top, or one of the highest, the top tier of talent in the field, whatever field that I'm trying to serve.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, because that's going to be important for us to perform well.
Okay, great. And that could be a really worthwhile goal, right? You want to attract talent. We want to attract the top talent in our field, right? And if that's our goal, right, we could go into more details of, okay, why is this important, right? Maybe you say it's mission critical, right? Right now, there's certain AI researchers that are offer millions of dollars in salaries, right? Because it's a really critical skill, and the business has decided we need to have this talent, right? Or sometimes it's we need to have this talent, and if nothing else, then not having them work for a competitor, right? Sometimes that's the strategic aspect of it as well.
And if I may add also, there is a lot of talent that is not perfect, and it needs development. And so it's very easy to just get the one with the highest GPA, per se, if you had some metric like that, the one that performs the best exam. But there's a lot of us that evolve, and I'm hoping that all of us do throughout the years, right? Mature, evolve. And so when I see students, they're in a learning curve. Some are faster than others, but they, at one point, learned something. And so we can get people that have the right sponge material to be able to get there.
Yeah.
And so I think that is also sometimes a lot more critical, and you get people that are going to be growing with you.
Yes. Yes, that's a great point. So, like Dr. Parr, right, what you were saying is if we want to hire for skills, it's one thing, but maybe we're hire for potential as well, right? So maybe, for example, if you look at Avis, the car rental company, right? Their HR strategy for a very long time was not necessarily to hire the A student, right? But hire B or C students, but they had sports experience or social experience, right? Because they figured for our business, it's important to have people with good social skills and good team working skills. And, you know, we can teach them our business. We don't necessarily need them to be super good academically, right? So that's why it's really important as a business to really know what do we want, right? And the strategy it needs to be customized to your business goals, right? So then the next thing is to really define your current situation, right? So to think about what are some numbers that we have right now. For example, if we have a lot of open positions, right? What's the percentage of open positions? How long does it typically take us to fill positions, right? When we have open positions, how many applications do we get, right? That are suited? And then what are some resources that we have? What are some positives? And what are maybe some of the problems or barriers that we're dealing with? Right? So what I heard, for example, during COVID and a little bit afterwards, what I heard from a lot of businesses that were trying to hire manual labor, right? It was hard to hire people, right? Many people, it was, part of it was the benefits that were issued to the government. That some people just prefer to stay safe and not jeopardize their health to go work, right? But it also affected the people that were recruiting in that area, right? On the other hand, people that were looking for maybe more knowledge workers, people that can work on desks and from home, for them a whole new market opened up because you were remote, you could hire people from across the United States, and you didn't necessarily have to convince them to move to Fresno, right? As an example. And so that's one thing, by the way, speaking locally now, that a lot of local companies mention me when you say, okay, relocate to Fresno, sometimes that can be a little bit more difficult to convince people to do that, right? Which then part of it is strategy also say, all right, how do you sell the location, right? For example, when we hire for the university, right, we also have that task to really make people feel welcome here and also highlight the positives of the community. Any comments about maybe positives or barriers that you could see for your business or businesses that you know?
Would turnover, employee turnover?
Yeah. So turnover, we'll talk about more about that. Yes. So turnover, it just per se is a problem, right? Which means you got to attract more and more talent, right? If you have people that come in and then 2-3 weeks later they walk out the door again, that's a problem. Yeah.
So Dr. Wandeler, some of the conversations we had, they expressed frustration with some of the laws that govern the regulations that restrict some of the conversations you can have to better understand somebody's motivations. Some of those fitness tests can and sometimes become discriminatory without realizing that, and we understand why those regulations exist. And so some of the family businesses rely on personality tests, skill-based tests, etc. And so that would be one of the challenges. Like, what is more predictive of performance? What is more predictive of fitness, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it will be a case-to-case basis, right? I think anytime you use tests, you probably have the test issues that will tell you about some studies and what they say will predict. But what I always encourage employers is to figure out for yourself, for your context, how replicable is that, right? And yes, you gotta, you can't be discriminatory in interviewing processes, right? But I think there's smart ways of kind of checking some boxes to know, what are you looking for, and from past experiences maybe, where have you gotten disappointed by certain motivations, right? And yeah, but is there specific situations that come to mind, or?
Well, the challenge was partially was monetary.
Okay, yeah.
I think it took a while for people to realize that we were in a very different financial situation. That the demand or the low availability of labor economically was going to drive wages up. It didn't help that a majority of our workforce was forced to be caregivers, and we didn't respond quickly enough, right, to say this is what we can do to supplement maybe childcare, et cetera. So then naturally a lot of people decided that it was worth staying at home and dedicating some of that time to their children.
Yeah.
So family, or I would say work-life balance issues, then that turned into business owners spending a lot more time at work, which then also affected their family business relationships. And so these are some of the conversations.
Okay.
So the challenge was, again, specifically just finding the talent and how that affected the rest of the family, including their own family business dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'll talk more about it when we talk about retention of talent, but also attraction, right? So basically, childcare benefits could be one thing, right? Talk a little bit more about flexible work arrangements in terms of time, right? One big one is the remote working or hybrid working, right? And how do you incorporate that strategically into your business, where you can, where you make it attractive for people to work for you, right? And sometimes you can compensate for, lower wages by doing this.
I mean, one that I found is for the hirings we're finding a lower quality and less experience of applicants who are actually interested. And so the other flip side of the issue is that we used to have more of a professional development curriculum within our organization to build people up. So it's like, okay, you're the right personality, you've got the right soft skills, we just have to train you up in this area. But now it's like, oh, we don't even have that. So it's kind of like we have to accept them as they are and lower our standards until we can get them to a place to bring them up to where they need to be for us to achieve the goals we had once before. So that was an internal struggle, is losing our professional development opportunities for our staff.
Okay.
So yeah, because when you find the right person, you can always train them up, but you need somebody to be available to train them up. And not just in the beginning and then, okay, go remember everything, but a continual mentoring and actually hard skills training.
Right. So that's a great example, right? Where it sounds like now it's more of a barrier, right? But if you have that professional development, it could be one of your resources, right? Where you can say, hey, we can bring people in at a lower experience level than maybe a competitor could. Yes, thank you. Now, one of the things that I notice a lot is that basically you can have two strategic angles, right? One is a vacancy focus, one is a candidate focus, right? So vacancy focus is what I think in a lot of smaller businesses you see is we start searching for somebody when we have a need, right? And typically it's urgent and now we need to replace them, right? The other one is when you look at a candidate focus is that you're always recruiting, right? You're always in recruiting mode because you're trying to fill that pipeline, right? And that's one thing that I would say for strategically is really to think about more on a candidate focus versus a vacancy focus, right? So it means that, hey, we're looking for somebody before we actually need them, right? The other question that you can ask yourself is the employee value proposition, right? So that question is this, I asked you earlier, why would I come work for you, right? If only a third of people actually recommends their workplace, right, that's a problem, right? But you gotta really be able to articulate what makes your company different, right? And a lot of times we're not really that clear, right? When you look at job ads, right, and you can maybe look at that from your experience when you look for a job, so what is the organization communicating to you, right? Are they telling you, hey, we need somebody that can do X, Y, Z, right? Or are they telling you, hey, we're really cool, our plan is to send a rocket to Mars, and, you know, do you want to be part of this? Oh, you know X, Y, Z? Great, right? So one really simple exercise for companies to think about, what is your value proposition for employees, right? Why should I work for you? And you can maybe think about this really practically. Let's say you want to be in the burger business, right? Let's say you want to work in a fast food restaurant. You can think about, okay, do I want to go out work at McDonald's or do I want to go work at In-N-Out? Right? And you can maybe think about there's different cultures there, right? Maybe there's also different expectations, right? Or the same thing if you want to work in retail, well, do I want to go work for Costco or am I going to go work for Walmart? Right? Do you guys know a little bit about the cultures there? Just a show of hands, where would you rather work, Costco or Walmart? Costco? Costco, yeah. Okay, why?
Because I don't like Walmart.
Okay, you like Walmart, okay. What do you like about Costco, though?
The guys I know at Costco all love their jobs. They get paid well and they like their work.
Yeah, so they like their work, they get paid well, right?
They're treated well.
They're treated well, right?
Quality.
Quality, yeah.
From top to bottom, quality of the way you interact with your clients, all the way to the products.
Huh?
You can trust them.
Trust them. Okay, yeah, that's an important variable too, right? Trust, right? So,
Your job expectations too, they're not asked to spread themselves thin, they're supposed to be efficient, effective, and very good people. You kind of know what to expect.
yeah.
The food court.
The food court, yeah, hey, yeah.
Chicken bakes, $1.50 hot dogs, and then frozen yogurt.
Yeah, okay.
That alone is really strong. Kind of being funny, but at the same time, I would love that. Because it's right there.
Yeah,
Get
yeah.
off work, get a chicken bake, get froyo, go home.
yeah. What about a Happy Meal? Could I not entice you with that?
Well, no.
No, really, okay. Right, but you'll kind of see, right, the reputation that companies have, right? And that could be a goal for you as an employer, right? If you had the Costco reputation, it would be a lot easier for you to recruit people than if you have the Walmart reputation, right? And that's something also for, I think, our local family businesses, something to think about, right? Word spreads, word of mouth, right? If people know, hey, this is a good company to work for, this is typically family businesses have a heads up by creating a family culture, right? By you're not just a number, right? And that's one thing that I would advise for family businesses, really to emphasize that story, right? With us, you're not just a number, you're not just a corporate, right? You can trust us, right? We want a long-term relationship with people, right? That typically works well for family businesses. And again, you can, just around this, you can craft a whole story, right? So maybe now you can just think about some pathways of how could I reach that goal, that talent attraction goal, right? One idea is, hey, we want to create an employee value proposition, right? And I'll share some other ideas with you and you can jolt them down, right? The goal is for you guys to be able to try something like that out tomorrow or next week, right? Discuss it with your team and say, here are a few things that we want to try. Let's see what, right? The other thing is, I'll throw out some more ideas, is to look a little bit more systematically at your recruitment funnel, right? And this is also kind of goes along with what I said earlier about, are you focusing on a vacancy or are you focusing on candidates, right? Because if you're focusing on candidates, you always want to try to raise the awareness about your business, right? You want to attract people to your business. You want to raise the interest, and then you want to have a lot of applications that are fitting your profile, right? You don't want to have a lot of applications just in general. You want people that actually qualify for the job, right? One small tip is, for example, when you go to a website, right? When you have your job search website, don't just have the open positions, but have an area where people can just apply, right? Because even though you might not be looking for that person right now, you want to have an opening where people can show their interest, right? And again, it's that candidacy focus, right? And then you have what Dr. Parr was talking about earlier, skills testing, right? To kind of filter out and see if they're a good fit. Then there's a whole process about interviews and then the actual hiring, right? We don't go into this part too much today, but there's a whole strategy here that you also can make sure that we have a good fit and that we don't waste people's time, right? Not the candidate's time and not the company's time either. Right? But long story short, if the bigger that funnel is, the better your candidates are at the end, right? And the higher the chances are that you have a successful hiring for the job. All right, what are some other strategies that you could use, right? And here, what we call line engagement is how do you involve your own people, right? And then the other one is how do you identify candidates and how do you approach them, right? So if you look at this, the job ads is pretty passive and there's low line engagement. Many people rely on this, right? Some employers also go to career fairs, which is, right? So you have a little bit more raising the awareness, but you're still not really involving your people that much, right?
What is line engagement again?
So line engagement is basically how do you involve your current employees in recruiting people? So I'll give you an example, right? Employee referral programs are a way to engage your people to help you find new employees, right? So for sometimes you give people a bonus if you refer a successful candidate, right? We also talk about tribal recruiting, right? To really emphasize the employees to go out and ask, for example, family members, friends, hey, apply here, right? With family businesses, I've seen this go in two ways, and maybe Dr. Parr, you've heard different stories, right? One thing is this, when you hire relatives, not necessarily maybe of the owner family, but just, if there's different relatives in the company, that can also add more dynamics, right? And we won't go into the ownership dynamics, but just having family members working with each other at work, right? It can be a great experience, or it can also create drama at times, right? And there it's just to be professional and to think about, right? There's pluses and minuses. I've heard stories where people are, hey, my uncle referred me to this workplace, so basically if I don't do a good job, I make my uncle look bad. So it really motivates people, right? At the same time, right, I might be working at the same place as my mother-in-law, right? And the moment I'm getting divorced from her daughter, right? Now she's mad at me and we'll have this type of conflict at the work.
Yeah, employer referrals can also backfire too. I remember I referred a gentleman and he got hired by the company, and a month later he got drunk and wrecked the company car and got fired. And so I'm going, oh gosh, I didn't know he was a drinker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so everything is to take with a grain of salt, right? Then when you look at, social community recruiting, right, that involves being more present at events, right? For example, then hiring recruiters, right? You don't involve the line, right? But you actually hire people to go out and search candidates, right? That's a very active way of doing that. And at times, you need that, right? Depending on your business, right? Maybe as a family business, you hire a recruiter to fill certain key positions, right? You might not find this in our area. You might have to go out and bring him in from out of state or from a different country, right? Maybe you have talent scouts, right? So for example, on LinkedIn, you guys might see that now as well. You get hit up all the time by people who are recruiters, right? It's their job to go out and find people. Okay? So there's these two approaches. One is more passive, the other one more active, right? I think for our local businesses, having connections to Fresno State is a great way of being more active and creating dynamics that make it easier to hire, right? For example, internship programs, right? I don't know if you guys had, who's done an internship already? Some of you, right? Right? Those are great experiences because you learn something. At the same time, you build a connection with businesses. And many times when businesses like what you're doing, they might consider you actually for a job later on, right? Okay, I've got some questions for you now. What are some strategies that you've seen working for yourself? What has helped you attract talent? Or maybe you've seen things that companies did and you felt, yeah, it works.
I had a manager who, since it takes a while to post a job, she would go on LinkedIn on her connections and find people with similar positions in that role and message them, just say, hey, I know you through this person. Would you like to go out to coffee? We have an opening right now, and we can talk about this, what it might be like, and just knowing that she could share like, hey, I'm not technically part of this hiring process, but I am the hiring manager, so feel free to ask questions away, just to gauge interest in application. So it was more of involving the line, but also very active. But for her, it was worth the time to make sure that she got a sense of who was available and who might be interested or not.
Cool. Yeah, great. Right. So that's kind of like here in the middle between employer referral and talent scouting, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Steal people.
Steal people? Yeah. Yeah.
That's what ended up being the case, right? We wanted to take people away from other places, which also drove wages up,
Yeah.
right? And now it's impossible.
Mm-hmm.
True that.
Yes. So stealing people, poaching away, right? One thing that I always advocate in community environments, right? It's like, okay, if I steal, it's a small community, right? So if I steal people from you, and then you try to steal people from me, right? One thing is to think about, hey, how do we create an environment where we have more qualified people, right? So how do we create this talent pipeline? Again, this is a little bit. I talked a little bit about this earlier. When you have announcements, right? Don't just talk about the requirements, right? But go to a place where you call or appeal to the vision of your company, to the value proposition for you as an employee, right? So if I was a family business in Fresno, I would want to start recruiting early for people to know, hey, this is a good place to go work. Kind of like the old days, right? Where people knew, oh, if you go there, it's a good place, you're going to have a secure job, etc., right? It might not be that you have a lifelong career, but just that people know that this is a good company to work for, and it's something that is appealing to them, right? The same dynamic as people just try to get into Google or try to get into Facebook, and they don't even really care what the job is. They know that once they're in, they then can maybe change a career path or go to a different position, right? All right, so now I want to ask you, what are you going to try? What are some ideas? What can you try, and what's the next step that you're going to proceed here? And as you decide what you're going to try, it's also how soon can you find out if this works, right? And how do I evaluate if this works, right? So it's this idea of the design thinking, right? We ideate, we have a bunch of ideas, now let's try something. Let's find out if it works or not. Because that's also important to know, do the actions, the change that we make, are they actually meaningful, are they effective?
So we're referring to evaluating our strategy or evaluating employees, or both?
The strategy, right? So to go back to make it really, as an example, right? Let's say if we decided, hey, we noticed that our advertisements are more like talking about requirements. Let's say we develop an employee value proposition, right? Let's come up with that. And let's start, we could, for example, nowadays A/B test. We're going to have two different announcements. One's focusing more on employee value proposition, right? Why should you come join us? And the other one talks more about the job. And then just see, hey, does this make a difference? Do we get more engagement with one or the other?
But you'd probably get different types of candidates.
Oh, yeah, you could see that, right? Do we get different interests? Do we get different types, right? Does one work better for us than the other? Yeah, right? I'm a big believer in using data to make decisions, right? You got to try things out and see what works for you, right? Especially if you've always been doing this and it's worked okay for you, well, you know, I'm not going to say you have to shift to this, but maybe give it a try because this could work even better, right? Other things might be, for example, if you go to a career fair, right, and it takes a lot of work to be there, well, how effective is that, right? And is it something that we could do in a more effective way? Right? You could try out different strategies in terms of recruiting, right? Let's say if we offer an employee referral program, how does this work? Does this actually give us more candidates or not, right? And what's the quality of the candidates, right? Are they the people that's gonna drive into a tree 1 month later, right? Or are they good candidates? All right, and then the other one that I wanted to talk to you all about is to look at what are maybe some hidden biases in our recruiting process, right? And that's a little bit more tricky. I'll just show you a overview, right? There's a list of biases, and some of them are probably causing unknown or unperceived harm to your business. For example, one is the affinity bias. Affinity bias means that we typically like people that are similar to us. We tend to like them better. It's not even that we do it on purpose, but that's just kind of what can happen, right? And so that means that when we hire people and interview them, if we don't have a really good process, typically people that are more similar than us will get hired more easily, right? And sometimes that's good because we get along with them and it's easier, right? Maybe we have similar backgrounds or similar interests, right? But it also creates more uniformity in the group, and diversity typically is better in a group because you have more different opinions, right? Or confirmation bias, right? If you have initially a good impression of a person, you tend to look for information that confirms that, right? Could also go the other way. If you have a bad impression, you notice things more that are, confirming that bad impression. Yeah, so that's just one of the I don't want to go too much into the details, but those are good to actually just look at your process and just evaluate. Hey, where do we have these hidden biases, and what are maybe measures that we can put in place to account for that, right? And a few things to do that. The first one is just to increase the awareness, right? To be aware, hey, this exists. Here are the things that can happen, right? Then audit your process for these biases, to systematically look, okay, how are we doing it? You know, when we have interviews, do we have a structured way of doing this? Right? What's our process like? And then provide training for people that are involved, right? And then have fair and inclusive hiring practices, right? And some of you might be doing fantastic in this already, and for others this might be new, right? I mean, you might benefit from actually understanding this better, because you know you might be limiting the pool of applicants that are applying to your organization. All right. Any questions or comments? We're coming to the end of this first block to talk about attraction of talent.
I love that you included the hidden bias, because if you're hiring people who are like you, it means they share your strengths, but they also share your weaknesses, perhaps, and that means you're not going to grow. Like, you're not getting your weaknesses covered unless you get people with different strengths and different perspectives than yourself.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Yep.
Quite a bit of biases.
Yes.
Quite a bit of biases, for sure.
Very early on, you mentioned promoting hope at work.
Yes.
I want to get in your head as to what you mean by that, because that sounds great.
Oh, okay.
Can you quantify promoting hope at work?
Yes, so the hope, the way that we look at it in psychology, is the belief that you have a better future and that you can make it so, right? Optimists are people that they think the future's going to be great, but it's not necessarily because of me, right? It's just, hey, things are going to work out. Hopeful people actually believe that they can make it better, right? And in my research, what I looked at is what can organizations do to promote hope at work, where people actually feel like they can affect the environment in a positive way, right? And so let's say, as an example, if you go to work and let's say your boss micromanages you, right? And you don't have a lot of freedom and autonomy to contribute, your hope levels tend to go down, right? Because you just can't affect that much, right? But on the other hand, if you go to work and you have opportunity to be involved, maybe you get training, right? You get development, right? Maybe you see a career progression, right? You can also make more money, as an example, right? Then that boosts people's hope, right? You can feel like, hey, I can be effective in life, right? I can make the future better. So that's how, just in a nutshell,
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does it, yeah.
It makes a lot of really good sense.
Yeah, yeah.
One of my former colleagues he worked in community development, so he saw a lot of poverty and like really bad situations, and he would always say, he's like, hope is something you have to practice every day. It's an intention that you have to do. It's not just something you can do once and walk away.
Yeah.
I used to work at me and Ed's. Hope is definitely something you have to practice.
At me and Ed's, tell us more. Why did you need hope at me and Ed's?
Management was stagnant. It wasn't, there wasn't quantifiable organizational goals. Most people just work at me and Ed's for a paycheck.
Right, exactly.
I don't know. I was always very customer service oriented. Maybe because I'm just a kid and I'm in school, right? But I would just do things other people wouldn't do. Like I would clean the restaurant, like the whole thing, very clean as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But there was never a sense of let's make it better, when there was a deficiency, it was always what's the bare minimum that we can do to return it back to where it was before,
okay.
Not make it better.
Yeah.
And that's what should be the goal of every single business is continuous improvement, or Kaizen is what they have in Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They talk about. And that's something that is definitely an employee-involved process, because you cannot have continuous improvement within your business without having continuously improving employees. But if you have an environment that oppresses people, then and it's the same thing as hope. Hope is also continuous improvement. Those two, the way you explained it, the way you give examples, those two things are almost perfectly synonymous. Me and Ed's was very oppressive. It was very why are you cleaning?
Dystopian.
Yeah, why are you cleaning? Why are you
Yeah.
doing this or that? You like don't have to. No one's making you do that, Lenny.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah.
I'm cleaning because I want the place to be clean.
Yes.
For no
yeah.
other reason.
See, and that's great that you had this intrinsic motivation to do that, right? And at the same time, there's also pizza chains that could actually create an environment where that's promoted, right? Where that's encouraged, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I got one on you. I worked at Taco Bell.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah.
I was a fry cook and dishwasher.
Uh huh.
And what I found for me is I turned into SpongeBob. I would go in really cheery and happy, and I did everything above the call of duty. The washing of dishes, I set a protocol that were above the standard protocol.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody would take the job and I'd go in and say, no, we're gonna do it this way. And, you know, it became fun. Everybody that came to work with me had a real good time
Yeah.
at work. So I had a lot of hope working there.
Mhm.
I went with the attitude of helping my colleagues, helping my fellow workers be better employees.
Yeah.
Because you're not always gonna be at Taco Bell.
Yeah. See, that's a great example, right? How you encourage others to go above the standard, right? You even if there might be like basic tasks, right, that you could learn, you could learn really quickly. You can always make it better, right? To your point with the Kaizen, right?
Yeah. And there's always the naysayers, why are you doing it? You don't have to. They're paying you this much. Why? And I would just say, well, you don't have to do it, but I would have fun, and then they would join me because it was fun doing the tasks.
Yes. Yes.
Made it fun.
Yeah. And see, what you guys are describing is kind of like how you create a culture where people are more engaged.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'll go into the next area here when we talk about retention of talent. I think you already touched on that with the culture. That's really important. And I don't know if you guys know Dilbert, but he's got a lot of good jokes about the workplace. All right. And by the way, that's one aspect where I work with companies as well, just to consult on how do we have more effective meetings. Right? Some of the managers complain, hey, we go from meeting to meeting to meeting, right? And when do we ever have time to get things done, right? So there's a lot of ways to improve meetings. I won't talk too much about this today, but we want to talk more about when you retain people. One thing that's important to know is why do people actually leave, right? And there's a lot of different reasons here. On the top, there's pay and benefits, right? About 20% say that is that. But if you look a little bit more into the details, engagement and culture is about 40%, and well-being and work-life balance is around 26%, right? So I don't know if that answers your question from earlier, right? It was like pay and or culture or social engagement, right? See, it's a bit of both, right? But looking at engagement, culture, and well-being together, you get about 66% of the reasons, right? So as an organization, you could conclude that 3 times as many people leave because of engagement and culture and work-life balance versus pay, right? So if pay is your main concern that you have right now, right, know that you probably are able to compensate a lot of that by creating an attractive workplace or a meaningful workplace, right? And there's a lot of, I'll show you guys a little bit more examples here. This is I don't know if you agree with this, right? Salary motivates you once a month, but a good work culture motivates you every single day. Right? Similar with a raise, right? A lot of times when we talk about compensation, giving people a raise, it gives a bump of motivation for a little while, but before you know it, you get used to it, right? Or your budget get used to it, and then it's kind of at the level where you were before.
Or the government takes your raise.
Or the government takes it, yeah. All right. All right, and so there's basically two ways to look at employee retention, all right? And this again is part of the culture, right? It's part of our business culture. So do we think that people join companies and leave bosses? Right? There's different beliefs here, right? Maybe you've heard that before, right? So as long as your boss treats you well, you know, you're going to stick around, right? But if your direct supervisor doesn't treat you well, that could be it could be an issue, right? One of the things is that when people quit, right, to then have exit interviews. Who of you has been part of an exit interview or has run an exit interview? Yeah? How was that as an experience?
Formulaic.
Formulaic, yeah?
Yeah, it's also your opportunity to give the advice you could because of power dynamics before, but whether it's acted on or not is doubtful.
Okay, yeah.
Taken seriously.
Yep. All right. And see, thank you for sharing that. And that's one of the main critiques that I have for exit interviews is it's basically looking in the rearview mirror, right? You already chose to leave, and now I'm going to ask you, why are you leaving, right? And hopefully, ideally, you're going to be actually honest. You feel like, hey, I can tell you what's going on, right? But more often than not, people might not even tell you the truth at that point, right? Maybe because they don't want to, or they're not comfortable, or it's just not worth their time, right? But it is important to try to better understand why do people, when they leave, why do they leave, right? There's ways of, if you have a larger workforce, there's ways of predicting if people are gonna, thinking about leaving, right? But also that is kind of like, if you look at the human level, the question is how actionable is that actually, right? Because if I notice, hey, you've been absent a lot, you might be less motivated, and then you might be leaving pretty soon, right? The question is, okay, what do we do with this information? The other point is, I believe, for example, that only a low turnover is good, right? Sometimes you actually want some turnover, right? Because what we want is, we don't necessarily want people to leave, but the people that are not the greatest employees, we don't want them to stick around either, right? So that's the balance there. One of the things is, for example, are we encouraging loyalty, right? If somebody leaves, do we treat them as traitors, or are we open for them to coming back later on again, right? That's another aspect of it. And one thing is, if you have a great culture, you're probably not trying to, chain people down and build walls, right? You probably want to encourage people to be able to leave and maybe come back again, right? Because if they really like the place, but maybe they kind of seen it for a while, right? They can go somewhere else, learn more things, and then maybe come back, right? So that's strategically also an important thing to build that culture where, don't think of people that leave that, hey, this is now over and you're not part of this anymore, right? But think of it as more long term. Did you have a comment?
No, I disagree with you.
Yeah.
We had a key employee that left. Everybody sad to see him go. And 2 days later, he came back.
2 days later, yeah, right. Right, and that's exactly.
He had another job with another bank, and he came back.
Yeah, right. And maybe it's 2 days later, or 2 months, or 2 years, right, or 5 years later, and I think as a business, it's always good to be able to have that ongoing relationship, right? The other one, there's a lot of points here, but one other part is that there's no surprises. And I think that's really a good sign of good management is when you're not surprised if somebody leaves, right? You should have this conversation. If somebody wants to go somewhere else, they should be willing to tell you, right? And then you should be aware of that. At times, I have workshops with companies, and people tell me, bless you, People tell me, oh, I'm thinking about leaving. They tell me when they know me personally, hey, I'm thinking about leaving because, maybe my commute is getting too long, or I'm looking for more pay and things like that. And I will relay that message to others and say, hey, did you know that so-and-so is, thinking about leaving, right? And I'll ask them if it's okay for me to share that. But it's basically also kind of a way of opening up the communication, right? Because they might not be willing to go ask for a raise, but if people know, then they can act on that. Right? So these are some of the ways of thinking about employee retention in a different way, and again, it focuses on the culture. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker, but this is basically the same exercise that we just did with the attraction, right? You could also think about this for your retention, right? So what is your goal, right? Are you trying to retain a lot of people, right? What does a good retention rate look like, right? Maybe you're wanting, there's a process that we use to identify key players in your organization, right? Where out of 100, 200, 500 people, there may be 10, 20, 50 people that are really key that we do not want to lose, right? And then you want to really be sure to to have a strategy to keep them with you, right? Could be that they're really skilled at something, right? Could be that they have really good connections with others, right? Maybe they're excellent salespeople or excellent engineers, right? Or they're great managers, they're great leaders, they're really able to motivate people, right? Maybe they're a fantastic cook, right? That basically people come to your restaurant because of that cook. So those are some things to keep in mind, right, when we talk about retention. And then again, keep in mind, why do they leave, right? So you could think about, okay, what aspects do we want to focus on, right? I got some more parts here that I want to talk about. I said earlier, engagement culture is about 40%, right? Advancement opportunities, right? So if you can provide your employees with a path to growth, that's something that has people stick around. Right? Or, for example, why people leave is the work itself did no longer interest me, right? Well, if you know that, right, if you have these ongoing conversations, you can maybe find different roles for people, right? I was talking to a local company a while back here. They were in the food processing, right? But they also had a real estate division, right? And they had some people were interested in working more in real estate, so they offered up new career opportunities there, right? Which is a great way of just, you don't have to leave the company, but you're actually doing a different job now, right? So again, here to think about, okay, what's our current situation, right? Is retention actually a problem for us? Is there anyone that wants to share a story or a situation that they're working with right now?
We had a situation where in COVID the budget shrank, and so they cut certain positions, and then they expected the same productivity, so they expected the rest of the team to take on additional work for no additional pay. And then in the next year and a half, we lost half of those people.
Yeah.
Because they were able to find jobs that actually did have higher pay, but it was less stress. And they knew they weren't going to they just got exhausted trying to make up for the work of the
Right. Yeah, it's a great example. And what type of work was it?
Development and sales, basically.
Okay.
It's fundraising, but it's in the corporate world, sales.
Okay. Yes.
Those aren't the people you want to lose.
Right. Exactly. Right. So really interesting.
The revenue generators aren't the ones. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, those are a very good example, right? Where we could look at the situation, right? If we if we did a rear view mirror look, right? Let's say if we talked to your organization, we'd say, all right, what's our problem is that we lost half of our business development staff, right? What are some of the barriers? Well, workload is what I'm hearing, right? Stress, lower compensation, right? Are there any resources that are positive in that situation? Is there anything that we can build on? Maybe not. We don't have to go into too much detail, right? But that's kind of the question that we would ask. Okay, what can we build on, right? And if there's not much to build on, we'd say, all right, it looks like we have some gaps that we need to fill, right? So we need to raise the compensation and we need to reduce the workload. Otherwise, people are going to leave, right? And that's kind of going back to that. Remember how I showed you guys that competitive advantage diagram? You know, that's the thing when you're in an open market, right? If you're not competitive, people can walk with their vote with their feet, right? And that's why HR strategy ultimately is business strategy.
Right.
That's a really good example. So just one thing to look at is basically pinpoint the root causes of why do people leave, right? And again, you got to be really specific about what sources of data do we use. Exit interviews are a good way, but it can also be biased, right? People might not be truthful, right? Or maybe don't get the information that you want. And it's after the fact, right? So there's a bunch of other examples, but okay, let me tell you real quick what you do with the exit interviews, right? You can also look at feedback from employees, right? So ideally, you'd already know before people leave, hey, how did you feel about our place, right? For example, just to go back to your situation, right? If we would have been open, maybe people complained, hey, the workload is too heavy, right? Or I feel like we're compensated too low, right? There might have been people that could have addressed this concern before people leave with their feet. Right? What you can also look is leadership management practices, the organizational culture and values, right? Compensation benefits, career development opportunities, evaluate the workload and work-life balance, right? And then key is if you have issues at the workplace, address them quickly, right? More often than not, if there's conflict or if there's bad management and we don't act quick enough, people leave, right? And then you lose good talent, and it's basically because of upper management not taking action quickly enough, right? So that's something to really to keep in mind. Again, as actions that you as leaders can take, right, is the key one is act on the feedback, right? It's pointless if you find the root cause of why people leave, but then you don't do nothing about it, right? Communicate findings with everybody, right? Again, just say, for example, I'm going back to this, right? Say, hey, we noticed that you guys have complained about workload. Here's what we're going to do about it, right? Bless you. We noticed that the compensation is too low. Here's what we're going to do about it, right? Or maybe you say, hey, we can't do nothing about it right now, but we will do something in the future, right? So for example, one thing that I've worked with a company on is to look at their a gain sharing program, right? Where they said, hey, we can't really raise we because of minimum wage going up and all that, we're allocating a lot of money to bring up the minimum wage folks, right? So all of the pots that we have for a salary increase is kind of going towards that, right? So we developed a communication strategy to everybody else to explain why is this happening, and then raises for them would be coming in the future, right? And that's the type of stuff that, it depends who the workforce is, but many people they don't really think about this, right? They just notice that, hey, the person that just got hired makes almost the same wage as me, and I've been here for 10 years, right? So that's important to really communicate that as well and do a good thing. And to your point from earlier about Kaizen, right? Use that feedback for continuous improvement,
My older sister was actually in a situation, sorry to butt in, my older sister was actually in a situation where she was working at Michael's, the arts and crafts store, and it had been so long since they had done an employee evaluation for her, and she was a manager, mind you, that when they had hired someone brand new, they were actually making more than she was. And Michael's is actually getting sued now. I think for other reasons.
Yeah.
But that's a big part of why she left. And you know, she was an amazing employee. She's got her master's in fine art from Fresno State right now. But she was probably one of the best people to talk to if you're trying to get acrylic paints or canvases. Her mural is actually over there.
Yeah.
On the art building.
Okay.
Yeah.
I work in the art building, so.
Oh, Angel
yeah.
Listikowski?
Yeah. So, let's not wait.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my older sister. And she was a fantastic employee and a horrible loss to Michael's, I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
And it's because why? Company policies weren't put into place by upper level management. They had gotten someone else from a different store to help her store because her store was having issues.
Mhm.
And that person just didn't do that, just didn't do employee evaluations, didn't do some other stuff.
Yeah.
We got a letter in the mail for a class action lawsuit.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So stuff like that can happen, right? It's surprising that when bigger companies like for example the one you mentioned, you know, you'd assume that they have more staff that is knowledgeable in these matters, right? But even for smaller businesses, right, that's one of the things to keep in mind, that compensation strategies should be, you know, fair, equitable, and you know, it's also why you might lose people. And if you're smart about this, you can use this as a competitive advantage, right? So I hope that you got some ideas of how you could retain people, right? So if you want to proceed, is jolt down some ideas of what can we do to retain people, what might we doing already, right? And then what can you try? What are some ideas? What can you try to retain people? And again, how will you know that it's successful? Right? How soon will you know that it works? And then also, again, who should be involved in evaluations? Right? So for example, with one of the companies I work with, we developed a mentoring program, right? Where we said, hey, as a new employee, you're gonna have a mentor, right? So we created a better onboarding experience, right? So that people felt more welcome. And then the hypothesis was, right, that people will stick around longer as well, right? Because again, one of the issues they had is they hire people and then they would leave after 3, 4 weeks or 5 weeks, right? So when we looked at this data, we said, okay, what can we do to counteract that? And then here, this is from the Academy for Innovative HR. There's just a bunch of retention strategies. And why I put this up here, right? For example, you see offer fair compensation and benefits, right? Which kind of addresses your point from earlier, right? Or offer flexible work environments, right? Strengthen the onboarding, which is what I just mentioned, right? But you see a lot of different strategies, and the important thing is that it's a whole, right? They all feed into each other, and if you create a culture that's very attractive for employees, right? Then you're also going to be able to, first of all, attract them more, and then also retain them better. And that kind of leads me to the conclusion for today, right? I'll share with you a few sample workshops, right, that I do that you can do with your people. For example, one is just skills development, right? So if people, right, remember how we talked about when people feel the career is developing, they can grow, right? One way to do this is to offer team development, skills development. The other one is work at the team level, right? If I go to a workplace where I feel like psychologically safe, where I feel welcome, where I feel like I belong, right? Then that attracts me to stay there, right? Big piece about leadership, right? I talk a lot about the digital and democratic mindset. And that, I'll just say what that means is that you're actually more participative with people, right? Sometimes today we talk about the generations, right? The Generation Z wants to be more, you know, less told what to do and less micromanaged. And I think it's not necessarily a generational thing. I think all people feel that way, right? Yeah, you had a question?
I wanted you to expand on psychological safety very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, so the psychological safety means that if you feel like you have an idea, right, but you're maybe not sure if it's such a good idea, right? If you don't feel psychologically safe, you're not going to share that idea, right? Because you don't want to look dumb, right? Or you don't want your coworkers to make fun of you, right? So an example of psychological safety is that you admit that. A big one is if you make a mistake, right? A lot of organizations, making a mistake is not acceptable, right? It's frowned upon, so people don't admit mistake and they try to hide it, right? Which can be fatal, right? If you look, for example, right now if you looked at the news this week at Boeing, right? They had a whistleblower that was sharing about the quality issues that they had there, right? And so he felt psychologically safe because he actually talked about it there, right? But they tried to shut that down, right? And typically we want to encourage this, right? So we want to encourage an environment that creates psychological safety. This is something that you might like here, right? How do we as an organization, how are we more agile? How are we more innovative? How do we focus on continuous improvement? Again, it's creating that workplace that people actually want to go to, right? Because it's cool, it's improving, it's getting better, right? It's people are wanting to make things more efficient, more effective, more fun, right? And at the end of the day, is when you grow your culture, right? You want to be mindful of what's the employee experience like, right? What's the value proposition? And we have workshops where we offer over 100 different practices that companies can take and put into place to make it a better work environment, right? And some of this stuff doesn't cost much to implement, right? And other stuff might cost more. I think if you look at, for example, Facebook, Google, etc., right? They offer free food, laundry, haircuts, etc. But all that to me is more fluff, because at the end of the day, right, when they had to increase profits, they fired thousands of people, right? And as a business, right, if you can build the trust where people know that, hey, if it gets a little tough, we won't just get rid of you. That's a thing that I think still a lot of people value, right? And I think that's something for our local companies they can leverage, right? As a family business, can say, hey, maybe we don't pay you as much as another company, but we also won't just fire you, and you're not just a number, right? So I wanted you to just take a few minutes on the third page to think about what are some two or three insights that you're taking away from the workshop today. And what are maybe some questions that you still have? And we'll have a little bit of time for questions still, right? Yeah. As you write this down, I'll share with you another little case, right? This is actually a family business in LA, right? The demographic is similar to many of our local family businesses. It's a manufacturer, it's a supplier to space. So SpaceX, Virgin Galactic actually ran out of business now, but Blue Origin, right? And what they wanted to focus on is also to create a more engaged workforce, right? Many of the people were really good workers, but it was a job, right? And what we did with them is we talked about more of an ownership mindset, right? So for example, here you see we played a game with them where they run their own business, right? And the goal was to get them more involved in the customer service and thinking about what do our customers want from us and how do we serve them better, right? And in the spirit of continuous improvement, right? It's all this about, how do we engage people more? Another example is maybe you guys know of the Morningstar Tomato Company. It's all over the valley. You might see the trucks during the tomato season, right? This is a company that doesn't have a single manager, right? Everybody is a boss. So you know how traditional organizations are more like a pyramid? This here is more like a network, right? Where everybody here is our colleagues, and they have contracts with each other where we have agreements of what do we do for each other, right? So we're actually treating adults as adults, right? And if you think about the traditional pyramid, right, there's a lot of supervisors and middle managers that basically are just trying to make sure that the work gets done, right? And imagine if you had a business where you could reduce that middle and make it a lot flatter, right? So we have more people doing the work versus people actually checking and managing others.
How does that model work for them?
That model works for them. That's a good question. So the model works in that sense that it started with one guy and a leased truck. And now it's a company that during the season has over 2,500 employees and makes over 700 million in revenue. So it worked out quite well from a, yeah.
I remember in Collins's Good to Great, he talks about a steel company where there's teams that are on the assembly line, or like they're working and building together, and the way they got them to constantly reach bigger and bigger goals was they offered a incentive for the groups that produced the most without error in the day. So they would get an extra bonus each day. So what they found would happen was the employees kept each other accountable, and the teams would only demand perfection from each other. And if there was a person on the team that wasn't getting them, that was dragging them behind, they would tell them to quit because it was costing them a bonus paycheck. And people would show up early, get all of their stuff done out of the way, so right when the clock started, they could immediately start. And it was like a race. And that's how one way they found to reduce management, because they didn't need to hold people accountable because the commission check was enough.
Yeah, yeah.
So it reminds
Yes.
me a little bit of that, possibly that kind of arrangement.
That's a great example. And that's actually what happened with this group of people. They had, it was about a year ago, they had to fulfill a big order, right? And this guy here actually is the supervisor here, right? And what he said to his team said, hey guys, and many of them were ladies, right? What do you guys want to do? Do we want to do overtime, or how do we want to, right? In a traditional company, this guy would have said, hey, here's what we do. We got to do overtime, right? What this new way of managing is what he did is say, here is the order. What do you guys want to do? How do we deal with this, right? And this particular group, they didn't want to do overtime, right? Although it would be extra pay and et cetera, but they have families and things like that, and they said, you know what? No, we're not going to do this. So they figured out a way to get it done that was actually quicker than what the supervisor could have figured out, right? And then they had more free time, right? Some of them went home earlier, and others, they learned other skills, right? So they got cross-trained, which actually helped them out down the road, right? And yeah, so it's kind of along those lines, right? The dynamics that start happening in these types of organizations are in my opinion, it's the way to go, right? Yeah. But long story short, do you now have at the last page of your handout, if you don't mind, if you could please fill this out. This is for us, so for some feedback, so you can tear it off. You have your name on the top. You don't have to put your name down. You can do it anonymously, right? But what I would appreciate is, what did you like about this workshop, right? What are maybe some tips that you have to make this workshop better? Are there other topics that you would be interested in, right? And if you are interested in a follow-up workshop in your organization, you can indicate that as well and say what topic, right? And then if you're interested in having more information, like from newsletters and things like that, please say yes. If you do that, then share your information as well. And then that would be it for today from my side.
Thank you once again, Dr. Wandeler. For everyone that is joining us via our YouTube channel, I will provide the information for Dr. Wandeler below in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. We will please stay tuned for further seminars at the Institute for Family Business, part of Fresno State and the Craig School of Business. Thank you once again.